Welcome, wanderer, to Whispers of History, the place where the past speaks in hushed tones, where truth drifts in like fog, and where history doesn't roar. It hums in your ear while you drift away. This channel is your quiet escape into the forgotten corners of time. The pace is slow, the tone is gentle, and the tales, well, they're just dark enough to make you wonder what's outside your window right now. Don't worry, probably just wind. If you enjoy stories that feel like secrets, whispered at midnight by candlelight, then curl up, dim the lights, and stay a while. We're glad you found us. You begin in silence, a silence so heavy it almost presses against your chest. The kind of hush that settles over old earth, the kind with secrets buried so deep even the trees refuse to speak of them. You're standing in front of something ancient, something too large to feel humble and too broken to feel proud. The monument rises before you, not in triumph, but like a scar on the land, jagged, gray, and leaning just slightly to the left, as though even gravity has its doubts. The plaque at its base is half erased. Convenient. It's cold, the air wraps around your shoulders like a damp wool coat, the sort that smells faintly of mildew and forgotten attics. Somewhere nearby, a raven croaks once and then decides you're not worth the effort. Typical. They say this place is cursed. Of course they do. And while most places wear their legends like oversized coats, this one wears it like skin, close, tight, and uncomfortably real. You get the feeling that if you touched the stone, it might flinch or whisper. A cheeky warning, you might not make it through this night. But then again, you've made worse choices at 2 a.m., haven't you? If you're still awake, consider gently tapping like and subscribe. Not out of obligation, but so you can find your way back here if the fog lets you. And before we drift into tonight's slow descent, tell us in the comments, where are you listening from? And what time is it by you? Let's see how many of us are traveling time together tonight. Now let's ease into tonight's journey, shall we? It begins in the highlands of Anatolia, where a monument known as stretches into the lonely sky. You can feel the altitude in your bones, thinner air, heavier thoughts. Built by King Antiochus I of around 62 BCE, the mountain temple tomb is a riddle. Massive stone heads lie scattered across the summit like toppled chess pieces, as if the gods got bored mid-game. Heads of eagles, lions, Persian gods, and Greek heroes, all starring in different directions, like they expected an audience that never showed. Antiochus, bless his overconfidence, declared himself divine, a god among mortals. And so, like any man with a flair for dramatic exits, he built himself a resting place above the clouds, part burial mound, part celestial billboard. It was supposed to be eternal. Of course, it crumbled within a century. Time's funny like that. You walk among the heads now. Their noses are broken, their expressions oddly calm considering they've been decapitated for over 2,000 years. Scholars still debate whether the heads were meant to fall off or if the mountain simply had other ideas. One theory, the original statues were seated and the heads tumbled down naturally. Another, the gods just didn't like being impersonated. The stone feels colder than it should, even under the sun. You brush dust off the eye of one forgotten deity and swear it blinks. Just once, probably your imagination, probably. Locals whisper that strange winds circle the site, winds that speak in riddles and leave bruises that don't hurt. And once a year, when the sun rises just so, the shadows of the statues align in ways that don't match the carvings. One old shepherd swears the lion head moves an inch east each winter, like it's crawling towards something. And here's the part you don't find in textbooks. For centuries, people who visited too often started having the same dream, a stairway of ash, a throne made of teeth, and a voice that said only, "Return what was stolen." No one's quite sure what that means, probably just legend, probably. Still, you step back carefully, eyes never leaving the cracked stone smile of Apollo. Or is it Mithras? Scholars can't agree. The clouds thicken around the mountaintop like old memories. You wonder if you stood here long enough, would the mountain remember you too? You keep walking. The wind tastes different now, saltier somehow and older. You've left the mountain behind and find yourself in the damp, moss-choked air of a Scottish glen. It's evening or maybe dawn, hard to tell. Time folds differently here. Before you, hidden beneath a stubborn hill, lies the half-forgotten cairn of Clava, an ancient burial site from the Bronze Age, estimated to be over 4,000 years old. It looks like a collapsed stone, but if you listen closely, the stones hum. Not with sound, but with presence. You don't walk through Clava cairns. You enter it the way you enter a dream you've had before but never understood. The air is thick with peat and the sharp scent of iron. Not blood exactly, but something with memory. You shuffle across stones that feel warmer than they should be, as if they remember the sun too well. Built long before the pyramids of Giza, the cairns were designed to align with the setting winter solstice sun, a fiery goodbye from the shortest day of the year, but only once. Miss it and the cairns remain silent. Wait another year. Some archaeologists suggest the alignment was purely ceremonial. Others insist it was part of a cycle, a return path for the dead. One theory, only whispered, never printed, claims the cairns weren't tombs at all, but keys. To what? Well, that depends on how much you're willing to believe before bed. You duck under a low stone lintel. Your hand brushes the top. The granite is smooth, too smooth for how rough it should be. You remember a rumor that the stones here were sung into shape. A myth, surely, probably. You pause, there's a symbol scratched faintly into one of the interior walls, a circle within a circle. No one knows what it means. Some say it's a sun, others a warning. The stranger still is the tale of the Clava bell. According to Highland folklore, every 100 years a soundless bell tolls beneath the cairn, calling something back, something unfinished. And yes, if you're wondering, several locals in the 1800s reported hearing a ringing inside the bones. Charming, isn't it? You lie down on one of the interior stones, just to rest, just for a moment. The stone feels like it's breathing, just slightly. You sit up quickly, a bird caws outside, one sharp cry, then silence. Again with the dramatic birds. The scholars argue about what the cairns were really for. Worship, burial, a Stone Age calendar. One delightful fringe theory suggests they were built to confuse time. No one's quite sure what that means, but standing here now you do feel slightly misplaced, a bit off-kilter, like you walked into someone else's memory. The air shifts, a breeze trickles through the corridor, even though there's no wind outside. You see the cairn was sealed, has been for centuries, and yet. There's always a yet, isn't there? You exit slowly. Not because you're frightened, but because something behind you isn't quite ready to let go. Don't look back, not yet. You keep walking. The grass thickens underfoot as you move south, and the air grows warm again, muggy, with that baked clay smell that always follows long-forgotten civilizations. You're in central Mexico now, under the indifferent gaze of the sun, at a place that once tried to become a city of gods. The Avenue of the Dead stretches out before you, a long, wide path flanked by ancient structures that loom like sleeping giants. The Pyramid of the Sun rises to your right, a beast of stone, its steps unnaturally steep. It was never meant to be climbed, not by mortals. And yet, here you are. They don't know who built, not really. The Aztecs arrived centuries later and gave it its name, which means the place where the gods were created. Even they were spooked. When the people who once lived here disappeared, they didn't just vanish, they seemed to have unraveled. Abandoned pottery, skeletons in odd positions, ritual altars suddenly broken. The scholars will say population shift. The silence says otherwise. Beneath the Pyramid of the Sun, a tunnel was found in 1971. Not a casual tunnel, either a deliberate, lined passage descending into a dark chamber. They found mercury in there, pools of it, artificial lakes of liquid silver glinting in torchlight like melted stars. Some suggest it was symbolic of the underworld. Others say it was a map of the cosmos. And some, the quieter, more haunted archaeologists, suggest it was meant as a mirror, a trap, one where reflections weren't always yours. The air inside the pyramid is heavy, not with dust, but with memory. You can feel it pressing in behind your eyes like someone else's thoughts trying to borrow your skull. And then there's the eerie little tidbit. They lined walls with mica, a mineral not local to the region, sourced from hundreds of miles away. Useful for heat insulation and for radiation shielding. Scholars still debate whether they even understood what they were doing. Because if they did, the next question is why. You're standing atop the pyramid now, squinting into the haze. The city lies beneath you like a broken clock. No one knows why it burned. Some say it was conquered. Others whisper about internal revolt. But there's a third version passed down in a handful of Nahuatl fragments that the city was devoured from below. You breathe in, the air tastes faintly metallic. Maybe mercury, maybe myths. A child once went missing here in the 1930s. The newspapers said he was just lost among the ruins. But his mother insisted he wasn't alone. She said he followed a man with a feathered mask. And though they searched for days, all they found was a small, charred doll on top of the pyramid where no child should climb alone. You take a step back, not out of fear, just caution. Something about this city feels less buried and more sleeping. You descend carefully. The stones groan beneath your feet, or maybe that's just the wind. You keep walking. You hear bells, faint, far away as though ringing beneath water. It leads you east now to India, to a monument you've seen in photos but never like this. The ground is dusty, warm, humming with unseen life. And there it is, the temple of carved not built, a feat of architecture that continues to confuse, well, everyone. It doesn't sit atop the mountain. It is the mountain. Hewn from a single rock in the caves, the temple wasn't stacked stone by stone. No, it was carved downward, 200,000 tons of volcanic basalt removed with astonishing precision by hand in the 8th century. The temple looks impossible even up close. Massive elephants carved in full relief hold up the platform. Pillars, intricate friezes, perfect alignment with the sunrise, all made without dynamite, without cranes, without reason. It wasn't just engineering madness. It was a spiritual mission. Legend says the temple was built in one night by a king desperate to save his queen. His prayer, if she survived her illness, he'd build a temple by sunrise. Either he had divine help or someone's fudging the timeline. And here's the tidbit they avoid in tourist brochures. Some monks claim the caves are not what they seem. One tale speaks of a hidden chamber beneath one that seals itself. They say it houses the god still unfinished, a shape in stone that breathes in dreams. Archaeologists deny this, of course. But in 1991, a drone sent into an inaccessible corner of the cave system abruptly shut down. Its footage, static, followed by 6 seconds of rhythmic chanting, in a language no one could trace. You run your fingers along one of the outer columns. The stone is strangely cool, not just shady but resistant, as though refusing your warmth. The scholars marvel at the logistics. How did they know where to carve? How did they avoid collapse? One expert quietly admitted, "It's like carving an entire cathedral from the roof down, blindfolded." The carvings themselves are unnerving in places. Figures with too many arms, faces with no mouths, serpents wrapped around time itself. Most are Shiva, destroyer of illusion. But there's one statue, no name, no inscription, that's been scratched out completely. Chisels used to remove its eyes. You pause. There's the feeling again, like someone behind you is holding their breath. The temple is eerily quiet despite its scale. No echoes, sound gets lost in the curves. A whisper here could vanish forever. And if you sit long enough near the inner sanctum, you'll feel it, the subtle vibration of the rock. Not quite seismic, more like breathing. You stay for a while, not long, just enough for the stone to remember you. And then gently you keep walking. It's raining now. Not a harsh storm, just a slow, persistent drizzle that seems less about weather and more about memory. The kind of rain that seeps into your sleeves, your thoughts, your dreams. You walk under gray skis, your footsteps soft on damp earth, until a ghost of a fortress emerges through the fog, looming, jagged, and reluctantly still standing. You've reached the Tower of London's. Its stones are heavy with history, and not just the grand kind written in books. No, this is the kind of history that hides in corners and refuses to make eye contact. Every wall has heard something it wasn't supposed to. Every floor has known the shape of blood. But you're not here for the obvious horrors. You're here for the monument inside the monument, the White Tower, a keep within a keep. A stone heart that still beats faintly with the kind of energy that hums in old wires. Commissioned by William the Conqueror in the 11th century, the White Tower was built as a statement, not a defense, a warning, thick walls, arrow slits. No one needed reminding who was in charge, but William insisted anyway. The Normans were nothing if not dramatic. Inside, it's cold. The kind of cold that doesn't fade when you breathe on your hands. You pass through the Chapel of John with its rounded Romanesque arches and pale limestone walls. It should feel holy. It doesn't. They say this place is haunted, but not by who you'd expect. And too loud, the princes in the tower, too sad. No, the real whisper is of a monk, faceless, silent, seen only from the knees down, gliding through walls, just a suggestion of shape, a footnote with sandals. And then there's the ravens. Oh yes, the famous ones, the birds that aren't allowed to leave. Ever. Legend says if the ravens abandon the tower, the kingdom will fall. So they clip their wings and keep their cages open, a paradox in feathers. So strangely, the ravens know their names, and they've been known to speak them in the dead of night, one by one, in a voice not quite human. You walk past the room where the crown jewels are kept, but your eyes linger elsewhere at the ancient stairs near the bloody tower. Worn smooth in the middle, like a stone tongue that's tasted every royal secret. You descend carefully. And now a strange fact. During renovations in 1674, workers found a small wooden chest buried beneath the staircase. Inside were two child-sized skeletons. Everyone nodded solemnly and said, "Ah yes, the missing princes." Case closed. Except the bones were reburied without testing. For centuries, when they were finally examined in the 20th century, no one could agree if they were even male. The scholars still argue about what happened. Poisoned, smothered, hidden, escaped. Some suggest the boys were never here at all. That the story was the monument built to distract, to explain away a louder lie. You pause at the archway, feeling something pull at the corner of your mind. Not a memory, exactly. More like someone else's forgotten regret. Outside, the ravens hop along the wet cobblestones, occasionally tilting their heads toward you, judging as they do. You take one last look at the tower's grim silhouette before stepping away. The rain hasn't let up. You keep walking. The skies finally clear, but only just. The clouds above are thin now, stretched like gauze across an infected wound. You're in Eastern Europe, Romania specifically, and what lies ahead of you is more than a building. It's a rumor carved into stone. You've arrived at the castle. Tall and brooding, with red spires and an inconvenient moat, the castle was built to impress and to intimidate. It's the kind of place that looks like it's been waiting too long for a lightning strike. It was the seat of the family, notably John, warrior, regent, and occasional vampire rumor magnate. But it's not John you're here for, it's the guest he once kept in the dungeon. A certain young nobleman, some say prisoner, some say political pawn, others say. Yes, that the Impaler, or III if you prefer something less theatrical. Some historians believe he was held here for several years in the mid-15th century. Not tortured, not yet, just watched closely. The cell still exists. A small, damp hole beneath the castle with chains bolted to the wall. It smells like wet iron and very old mildew. A place too small for movement, too dark for madness, but endured. And when he left, he was different. You walk through the hallways, past faded tapestries and cracked frescoes. There's one panel almost hidden of a winged creature with a crown and blood dripping from its claws. The eyes have been scratched out. Locals call it the Lord of the Night. The tour guides don't talk about it. And then there's the well in the courtyard, dug allegedly by Turkish prisoners who were promised freedom if they reached water. They did after 17 years, but instead of release they were executed. The final inscription reads, "You have water but no soul." Of course it does. A local superstition claims that if you drop a coin into the well and make a wish, it will come true. But only if your wish is something you never tell anyone, not even yourself. And yes, the coin disappears. Always, some believe the well is bottomless. Others say it's not a well at all, but a mouth. You lean over the edge for a moment, hearing nothing but your own breaths. One story, unconfirmed, obviously, says that on certain nights, the well reflects not your face but someone else, someone waiting. Well, you step back. As the wind whistles through the empty halls, a door creaks in a room you haven't entered yet. Best to leave it that way. As you cross the narrow bridge out of the castle, you see something in the distance. A figure, maybe, or just a shadow, standing still in the field, watching. You don't wave. You keep walking. You walk for a long time without really walking. The world softens into mist and the air becomes crisp again, like the first breath after a long silence. You're somewhere colder now. Northern, wind-bitten, stone has returned under your feet, only here it's smoother, more deliberate. You're in Norway. Before you stands the cathedral in Trondheim. Dark gray, gothic, and sprawling, a strange choice for Scandinavia. Built over the burial site of Norway's Viking-turned-saint-turned national symbol, this place is less cathedral and more contradiction. It looks like it belongs in a horror painting, not in a Nordic town known for fish and politeness. And here's the curious thing. The cathedral has burned down, been rebuilt, partially collapsed, and re-risen more times than it cares to admit. The stones change subtly each time. The saints on the wear different expressions now, more tired, less forgiving. Died in 1030 at the battle of, his men buried him hastily in a field. But according to legend, his body didn't decay, quite the opposite. It began to smell sweet. Flowers bloomed on his grave. When they exhumed him, of course they did, his cheeks were still pink. Scholars chalk it up to well-preserved conditions. Believers called it a miracle. And so he became a saint. And inside, the cathedral hums faint, like a refrigerator with secrets. The pillars seem taller than gravity should allow. You step into the crypt and the air shifts again. Still, but not dead, there's something else here. One of the weirder traditions here is the Swake Path, a slow, looping pilgrimage people take through the church in the middle of the night. Alone. The goal is to pray and reflect, but also to confront what they call the unseen. One written account from the 1600s describes a figure in the upper nave, a man in full armor with no face beneath his helmet, just mist. Another pilgrim wrote that she heard footsteps circling her as she walked, but when she turned, it was only her own. The organ, too, plays tricks. Installed centuries after the original build, it occasionally emits a single note during full moons, just one. Low, sustained. Sometimes just before the note plays, you feel your heart race, as if your body knows what's coming before your ears do. Historians disagree over how much of sainthood is myth, politics, or genuine reverence. One theory suggests the body that was exhumed might not have been his at all. That was buried elsewhere, and whoever lies in the crypt now is simply playing the part. You pause under the rose window, colored light scattering around you like broken promises. For a moment, the red segment seems brighter, like it remembers something you don't. A bell rings above, soft but immediate. You hadn't noticed the hour. You walk toward the door, not quite ready to leave, but aware you were never meant to stay. You keep walking. The light changes again. Not quite sunrise, not quite dusk. Just that strange in-between glow that makes shadows stretch too long. You're deep in Turkey now, not far from Cappadocia, staring into the yawning mouth of the underground city. Oh yes, a city. You expected caves, perhaps. A monastic retreat or a handful of carved rooms, but goes down 18 stories deep. A whole vertical metropolis beneath the soil, complete with wine cellars, stables, ventilation shafts, and a baptismal chapel. Built, some say, as early as the 8th century BCE. Others claim it's much younger, but no one really knows, not exactly. It's cold inside. Not the fresh kind, but the stale, subterranean chill of air that hasn't changed temperature in centuries. You descend slowly. Each level feels like stepping through time, only the clocks are missing. The hallways are tight, the ceilings low, you have to stoop. Your breath echoes more than it should. It's believed that could house up to 20,000 people. 20,000 underground for weeks at a time, maybe months. Entire families lived here during invasions, hidden, huddled, silent. One scrape of metal could betray you. one crying child a sneeze. And the doors, round stone slabs that roll into place from the inside, can only be opened one way, designed to seal out the world, or maybe seal something in. There's a room halfway down without explanation. It has no religious symbols, no tools, just a pit in the center, perfectly circular and smooth as glass. Some believe it was a well, others say it was ceremonial. One archaeologist famously refused to discuss it after descending alone. When asked what he saw, he simply said, "It's still listening." Fun, isn't it? Here's your cultural tidbit. In Cappadocian folklore, the underground cities weren't built by humans at all. They were dug by Peries, fairy-like spirits known for their light but mischievous touch. Some stories say the cities were created to protect people from the wrath of the sky gods. Others say the cities weren't to keep something out, but to keep something from rising. The scholars argue, of course, the engineering is clear, the layout has purpose, but no one's found any written plans, no blueprints, no records of construction, just endless corridors descending like a spiral into sleep. As you reach one of the deepest levels, you feel a pressure in your ears, like the earth is whispering, just not in your language. A single bulb glows ahead, dim, too yellow, you turn it off as you pass. Something in the dark breathes once. You keep walking. The air feels lighter now, but not in the comforting way, more like a vacuum. A stillness so complete it rings in your ears. You've emerged in China, surrounded by silent rows of unearthed soldiers, each one frozen mid-stance. Welcome to the army. There are thousands of them, rows upon rows of life-sized warriors arranged with military precision, each one unique. No two faces alike, some grim, others stoic, some young, others weathered. They do not blink, you check twice. They were discovered by accident in 1974. Farmers digging a well stumbled upon the first clay fragments. What they thought was a strange stone turned out to be a kneecap. A kneecap that changed archaeology forever. The army guards the tomb of Qin, the first emperor of unified China. He ruled with brutality, ambition, and a deep fear of death. So naturally, he commissioned an empire underground, complete with soldiers, horses, chariots, musicians, and possibly traps. Well, yes, traps. The emperor's actual tomb remains sealed, not out of respect but fear. Ancient texts speak of rivers of mercury and palaces of death beneath the mound. Probes confirm abnormally high mercury levels in the soil. Scholars argue whether this is due to natural contamination or if the ancient engineers really did build a miniature, toxic afterlife. One detail often missed: the soldiers were once brightly painted. Reds, blues, even pinks, but the colors faded within minutes of exposure to air after 2,000 years in darkness. The warriors didn't want to be seen, and they don't like being watched. A lesser-known figure among the rows is the kneeling archer, serene, almost delicate in posture, with a face that seems more curious than militant. Locals whisper that if you stare into its eyes long enough, it looks away, but only once, and only when no one else is around. You step between the columns. The air is heavy with clay dust and something older. There's a rumor, hushed always, that 2 workers vanished during the first excavations. Not ran away, vanished. No sound, no trace. One of their shovels was found days later in a soldier's hand that hadn't previously been holding anything. A coincidence, surely. The tomb of Qin has been untouched since his burial over 2,000 years ago. Scholars still debate whether to open it at all. Some feared disturbing it would awaken something, not a curse necessarily, just a reaction, like tipping over a perfectly balanced scale. You back away slowly. A breeze stirs the dust, though there's no wind underground. The soldiers remain unmoved. You keep walking. You're above ground again, but the air is somehow even staler. You're in the Czech Republic now, in a small, unsuspecting town called Hora. The buildings are charming, the streets are quiet, and then you arrive at the ossuary. The bone church. From the outside, it looks like any other quiet Gothic chapel. But inside is a different story entirely. Because inside, the is made entirely of human bones. Skulls, femurs, ribs crafted into chandeliers, chalices, and wall art. Even the coat of arms of the family rendered in jawbones. Roughly 40,000 skeletons make up the interior, each one cleaned, arranged, and polished to pale ivory. It is both reverent and grotesque. Beautiful in the way antique surgical tools can be beautiful, functional, decorative, a little too honest. The story goes that in 1278, the abbot brought back a handful of dirt from Golgotha, the hill where Christ was said to be, and sprinkled it over the cemetery grounds. Word spread, and suddenly everyone wanted to be buried there. Death by demand. By the 1400s, the cemetery was overstuffed. Plague and war helped. Bones were exhumed, stacked, forgotten. Until 1870, when a woodcarver named was hired to organize them, and organize he did. With style. He signed his name near the door in bones. Some say he worked at night alone, muttering prayers under his breath. Others say he spoke to the skulls directly, asking permission as he moved them. He never slept in the chapel, though. No one ever did, no one ever does. One particularly unsettling display is the chandelier, said to include at least one of every bone in the human body. It hangs low, too low, like it wants to brush against your head, like it wants to remember you. Here's your obscure tidbit. In Czech folklore, bones carry the echo of a soul. Not the soul itself, just its last breath. It's said if you gather too many bones together, the echoes begin to murmur. People have reported hearing whispers here, not full sentences, just syllables, sounds that shouldn't echo but do. The scholars debate the purpose of the ossuary. Some say it's memento, a reminder of death. Others suggest it was a spiritual amplifier, that prayers offered here traveled farther, that maybe, just maybe, this was a place between. You stand beneath the chandelier and exhale. Oh, it does not swing, but it should. You step outside into the fresh air. It doesn't smell fresh at all. You keep walking. The sky dims once more, a velvet kind of twilight settling in that doesn't bother with stars. You're surrounded by tall grass now, and the hush of wind that rustles it sounds suspiciously like 1,000 quiet sighs. You're in the American Midwest, Kansas to be precise, but not the Kansas of wheat fields and yellow brick roads. No, this place is older, stranger. You're standing before a pile of rocks that doesn't belong here. No plaque, no signs, just the subtle hum of something out of place. Welcome to the spring, or rather, what's left of it. Once sacred to indigenous tribes like the and Pawnee, the spring was a deep, crystalline pool of mineral water, bubbling with strange life and unshakable mystery. They called it a spirit water. Offerings were left at the edge of the spring, beads, buffalo hides, sacred items. It wasn't just a water source, it was a living entity. In 1964, the U.S. government decided to dam the nearby Solomon River and flood the region. Spring disappeared beneath Glen Elder Reservoir. Progress, of course. But here, where things get murky, divers sent to survey the spring before flooding it reported strange readings, temperature shifts, unexplained currents, and according to one report, a low-frequency sound that seemed to come from below the spring floor. The source was never found. They blamed equipment failure. Naturally. And before the flooding, several locals reported seeing figures near the spring at night. Not people, not quite animals either, just movement, low to the ground, sinuous, watching. One man, a night fisherman, said he saw a woman walking into the spring fully clothed, holding something close to her chest. She never came out. No body was recovered. Her name wasn't recorded. You wade now through grass that used to be water. The spring is gone, they say. But if you stand at the reservoir's edge at dusk, they say the water moves differently. A darker ripple, a slower breath, and if you toss in a coin, it doesn't splash, it vanishes. Here's your obscure tidbit. Among local tribal legends, was guarded by an underwater spirit, a child made of light who only appeared to those near death. The tribes believed if the spirit turned its back on you, it meant your soul would never find the river of stars. The scholars argue over whether the spring had geothermal properties, or if it was merely an illusion caused by mineral distortion. A few old surveys suggest the spring might have been bottomless, but none were conclusive. And now, it's under 40 feet of silence. You pause at the shoreline, toes just brushing the soft mud. It feels warm. Far out in the center, something breaks the surface just once. No splash, no wake. You keep walking. The air sharpens, now growing thinner as elevation claws at your lungs. You find yourself in the Andes, surrounded by jagged peaks and the kind of cold that doesn't just freeze you, it listens. You've reached. Yes, try saying it. The locals smile when tourists attempt it. You're standing above where massive stone walls snake across the landscape like the fossil of a forgotten god. The stones are impossibly fitted, some weigh over 100 tons. And yet they interlock so perfectly that not even a blade of grass can slip between them. No mortar, just pressure, precision, and something else, something that feels like obedience. No one's quite sure how it was built. Most believe the Incas created it, though the structure predates them. Some of the stones show signs of reshaping, others do not. A Spanish chronicler once wrote that the devil himself helped build it. That's the kind of conclusion you reach when humans can't explain things. Blame a devil, blame a god, anything but an engineer with vision. You walk the zigzagging path between the walls, which some believe was designed to resemble lightning, a sacred symbol to the Andean peoples. Others say the path itself is a map, not of terrain but of time. A sequence of events yet to unfold, or already repeating. At the heart of the complex lies the throne of the Inca, a series of carved seats in the rock. Theories abound: observation post, ritual altar, astronomical calendar. One fringe theory suggests the entire structure was a kind of tuning fork, meant to resonate with the earth during solstices, channeling energy from below. And now for your peculiar tidbit. In Quechua legend, the rocks are alive, slow-breathing entities that only move when the world forgets them. One story tells of a stone that shifted 5 feet overnight after being left unguarded. The workers blamed sleepwalking. The stone did not comment. In 1949, an earthquake hit and devastated much of the colonial architecture, but the walls remained, unmoved, untouched, as if the earth remembered who built them. You pause and press your palm to one of the larger stones. It's warm, not sun-warmed, internally warm like an animal in hibernation. Now, scholars disagree, of course. They say the methods were lost with time, that no blueprints remain, that the stones are just stones. But when you turn away, you feel it, that quiet certainty that one of them turned slightly, just slightly, as if adjusting its view. You do not look back. You keep walking. You descend again, not in height this time, but in mood. The world around you feels damp, sunless, and faintly metallic. Your path now leads to Paris, but not the Paris of postcards. You pass the glowing tower, the Seine, the tourists, and keep going, down, beneath, into the earth, underbelly. Welcome to the catacombs. Beneath the city of light lies over 200 miles of tunnels, ossuaries, and forgotten air. Only a small portion is open to the public, the rest, walled off, hidden, mapped only by graffiti and ghost stories. And bones, so many bones. 6 million people rest here, or more accurately, their remains do, stacked neatly, skulls arranged in patterns, femurs piled like firewood. At first it seems clinical, then deliberate, then deeply unsettling. The catacombs were born from necessity. In the late 18th century, Paris's cemeteries were overflowing, leaking into basements, spreading disease. The solution? Empty the graves and carry the dead below, quietly, efficiently. Night after night, carts full of bodies moved through silent streets like sleepwalkers. The workers said prayers as they poured bones into the darkness. Some wore masks, some wept. Here's something few mention: not all the bones are from cemeteries. Some, historians whisper, were collected from unmarked losses, those who died alone, unnamed, and were simply swept into the flow. In one passage, deep beyond the tourist zone, there's a wall with a carved phrase: "Stop, this is the empire of the dead." It's not just a warning, it's an invitation. A cultural tidbit: among Parisian urban legends, there's one about the Black Room, a chamber so deep in the catacombs that sound no longer travels. They say anyone who reaches it hears nothing, not even their own heartbeat. And if you stay too long, you stop remembering how to climb back up. In 2004, police discovered a secret cinema hidden within the catacombs, complete with a projector, seating, and a fully stocked bar. No one claimed it. A note left behind simply read, "Don't try to find us." You pause beside a skull that seems to smile wider than the rest. The teeth are too even, too new. The scholars argue about how many tunnels have collapsed, how many chambers remain sealed. One surveyor described the layout as a knot made by a child with infinite string. No maps match. Your breath fogs in the cold. You feel moisture drip on your shoulder, but when you look up, the ceiling is dry. You walk faster. You keep walking. You descend again, not in height this time, but in mood. The world around you feels damp, sunless, and faintly metallic. Your path now leads to Paris, but not the Paris of postcards. You pass the glowing tower, the Seine, the tourists, and keep going, down, beneath, into the earth, underbelly. Welcome to the catacombs. Beneath the city of light lies over 200 miles of tunnels, ossuaries, and forgotten air. Only a small portion is open to the public, the rest, walled off, hidden, mapped only by graffiti and ghost stories. And bones, so many bones. 6 million people rest here, or more accurately, their remains do, stacked neatly, skulls arranged in patterns, femurs piled like firewood. At first it seems clinical, then deliberate, then deeply unsettling. The catacombs were born from necessity. In the late 18th century, Paris's cemeteries were overflowing, leaking into basements, spreading disease. The solution? Empty the graves and carry the dead below, quietly, efficiently. Night after night, carts full of bodies moved through silent streets like sleepwalkers. The workers said prayers as they poured bones into the darkness. Some wore masks, some wept. Here's something few mention: not all the bones are from cemeteries. Some, historians whisper, were collected from unmarked losses, those who died alone, unnamed, and were simply swept into the flow. In one passage deep beyond the tourist zone, there's a wall with a carved phrase: "Stop, this is the empire of the dead." It's not just a warning, it's an invitation. A cultural tidbit: among Parisian urban legends, there's one about the Black Room, a chamber so deep in the catacombs that sound no longer travels. They say anyone who reaches it hears nothing, not even their own heartbeat. And if you stay too long, you stop remembering how to climb back up. In 2004, police discovered a secret cinema hidden within the catacombs, complete with a projector, seating, and a fully stocked bar. No one claimed it. A note left behind simply read, "Don't try to find us." You pause beside a skull that seems to smile wider than the rest. The teeth are too even, too new. The scholars argue about how many tunnels have collapsed, how many chambers remain sealed. One surveyor described the layout as a knot made by a child with infinite string. No maps match. Your breath fogs in the cold. You feel moisture drip on your shoulder, but when you look up, the ceiling is dry. You walk faster. You keep walking. The jungle heat clings to your skin like a secret, but the air begins to thin again, not from elevation, from history. You're in the middle of the desert now, Jordan, and what rises before you isn't carved into the landscape. It is the landscape. On Petra, the city of rose-red stone. It's hard to breathe here, not because of altitude, but because of awe. You step into the narrow passageway that leads into the heart of the ancient Nabatean city. The walls rise high on either side, curling like petrified waves. And then, with almost theatrical timing, the treasury reveals itself, towering, ornate, pink-hued. A monument that seems too beautiful to be accidental. And maybe it was. The Nabateans were master builders, yes, but also master illusionists. Petra is a city of hidden meanings. What looks like a tomb might be a temple. What seems decorative might be code. Historians still argue over what many of the facades were actually for. And here, where it turns. According to Bedouin legend, the treasury was never meant for the living. It was built to trap a jinn, a spirit of fire and wind, who tried to bargain for eternal life. The urn at the top, not an urn, a seal, one that shouldn't be broken. And yet it has bullet holes. Early explorers thought there might be gold inside. They shot at it, nothing happened. But a week later, one of the shooters vanished in the night. No one looked for him. His guide simply said he heard the whisper. Here's a curious detail. Petra's walls sing, softly. If the wind flows just right through the canyons, it makes a low, flute-like moan that follows you, not in front, not behind, beside you. As if the stones are humming in time with your steps. There's also the lesser-known high place of sacrifice, accessible only by a winding staircase cut into the rock. Tourists rarely go, not because it's dangerous, but because many who do report vivid nightmares for weeks after. The dreams all share one thing, a voice from beneath the sand asking, "Do you know your true name?" You pass a row of weathered facades, half ruined, half erased. Symbols that no one has translated. One carving looks like a man with three eyes, another like a map with no compass. The scholars debate whether Petra was a spiritual center or a trade hub. Maybe both. One theory suggests it was never a city for the living, but a between realms. A place to say goodbye, but not where you begin again. You sit for a moment in the shadow of the monastery, high above the valley. The silence here feels deeper than most, not empty, just full of restraint. The wind rises, you think you hear a name. Oh, it isn't yours. You keep walking. The sand turns to soot beneath your feet. The sun dims behind thick, unbroken cloud. You're in England now, a Wiltshire, but you're not at Stonehenge, you're south of it. Quieter, stranger. You're at Hill. It looks unassuming at first, a massive, grass-covered mound rising from the fields like an accidental pimple on the land. But this is no natural formation. Hill is the largest prehistoric man-made mound in Europe, taller than some Egyptian pyramids, and no one knows why. Built over 4,000 years ago with nothing but antler picks, woven baskets, and determination, it consists of chalk, clay, and earth piled precisely, layer by layer. But what lies inside? Oh, nothing. No burial, no chambers, no artifacts, just solid silence. Excavations have gone down, sideways, diagonally. All paths end in confusion. One archaeologist in the 1960s described it as digging into a thought that refuses to finish itself. The theories range from the spiritual to the absurd. A celestial calendar, a fertility symbol, a beacon to the stars, or, as one deeply unfunded academic proposed, a very old joke. Here's your cultural oddity. In medieval times, locals believed the hill was hollow, and inside was a man made entirely of gold, seated on a throne. Others said it housed a dragon's egg sleeping in stone. The truth, if there is one, remains buried, perhaps literally. Even now resists answers. A tunnel dug in 1776 collapsed for no reason. A later one caused unexplained flooding. Tools went missing. One surveyor claimed his compass spun wildly inside the hill. He never returned. And then there's the vegetation. Grass on grows faster than the surrounding land. Greener, richer, as if the hill is being fed from beneath. The scholars are divided naturally. Some argue it's just symbolic. Others suspect it aligns with Avebury's stone circle nearby, forming a ritual landscape designed to communicate with something. You climb to the top, slowly. There's no path, only the gentle resistance of grass that seems to push back. At the summit, nothing waits for you, no plaque, no shrine. Just wind, thick and whispering. They say if you lie down at the summit, close your eyes, and wait until the wind stops, truly stops, you'll hear footsteps behind you. Oh, you don't test it. You keep walking. The path narrows now, winding through snow-dusted stones and thick northern mist. Your breath hovers in front of you, visible, as though reluctant to move on. You've come to Sweden, to the shores of lake. And nestled deep in the forest lies a circle not built, but laid by careful hands and quiet intentions. Welcome to the Älvstenar. Sweden's own Stonehenge, but stranger in its restraint. 59 massive boulders arranged in the shape of a ship right on the cliff's edge. Not jagged, not ominous, just still. A fossil of purpose with no confirmed creator. The stones date back 1,400 years, but some argue it's much older, possibly Bronze Age. The shape is deliberate. The bow and stern stones are taller, curving ever so slightly. A ship frozen mid-journey, but to where? Unlike Stonehenge, Ailstenar feels light, but the stillness is unnerving. The wind behaves oddly here, curling around you in loops. You try to step into the ship without ceremony, but your body slows. The kind of slow that feels imposed, like the air here has rules. And then the legend, they say it's the burial site of a king. King Ail, of course, supposedly laid to rest in his ship, stones marking his eternal voyage to the afterlife. But no body has ever been found, no grave, just stones waiting. Locals tell of a different story, that the ship was never meant to leave, that it's a cage, a boundary for something buried beneath, a sailor who refused to die or a god who refused to sleep. Here's your eerie tidbit. During the midsummer solstice, shadows from the stones align perfectly with the sunrise and sunset, forming a cross of light across the circle. But during the winter solstice, the shadows fall backwards, as if the light forgets how to behave. In the 1950s, a small research team attempted to remove one of the stones for study. Their equipment failed. A truck broke down 3 times. A worker broke his leg without falling. The stone remained. No further attempts were made. Scholars can't agree if it was a calendar, a grave, or a ritual marker. One theory posits it was a giant clock, measuring not time but silence. A temple for waiting, one researcher wrote, then never published again. You sit on the stern stone just briefly. The wind hushes. You feel it in your spine, a slow thrum like something vast, turning beneath the earth. You stand, you don't look behind you. You keep walking. You're warmer again, but not comfortable. The kind of warmth that feels baked in, ancient, and watching. You're in Malta now, an island of rock and salt where time seems to pool in the cracks between stones. Before you, rising low and wide like the bones of some forgotten creature, is the temple complex. Megalithic, monolithic, mysterious. Older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge. These limestone structures date back to around 3600 BCE, and no one fully understands how or why they were built. Some parts are so precisely aligned with the solstices and equinoxes that it feels like architecture born from astronomy, not stone. The main entrance aligns perfectly with the rising sun on the summer solstice. Light travels through a small opening, illuminating a specific altar deep within, a moment that lasts seconds. A design so precise it suggests obsession or reverence. Inside, the stones are smoother, rounded, almost organic, like the temple wasn't built but grown. There's a chamber with a fat lady statue, wide hips, no head. She's not actually a goddess, but people keep calling her one. Others say she represents fertility, or time, or memory. I know one knows. And here's the thing, the temple was sealed forgotten under layers of earth and silence. When it was uncovered in the 19th century, the archaeologists noted a smell. Not decay, not rot, just old, something that doesn't have a modern name. A peculiar local belief holds that if you visit the temple alone and stand in the main apse with your eyes closed, you'll hear a voice say something in a language you don't understand. Not in your head, in your ear. Those who heard it say it leaves them feeling watched, permanently. There's a lesser-known room in the temple called the Oracle Hole. A small opening carved through a thick wall, allowing sound to pass between chambers. Whispered words from one side echo eerily amplified on the other. It was likely ritualistic. or instructional, or maybe confessional. The scholars argue endlessly whether it was a temple or a tomb. No bodies were ever found, just altars, carvings, holes. And then there's the cracked stone near the entrance. It split long ago, but the halves remain impossibly close, not touching but vibrating slightly when the sun is highest. That part wasn't in the reports. A local guide told you, smiling too little. You place your hand on one of the standing stones. It's warm, but the air is not. A gust of wind blows through the entrance, though no breeze moves outside. Well, you step back. You keep walking. The wind has teeth again. It bites at your cheeks as you rise higher than you've been before into the craggy, cloud-snagged mountains of Bhutan. Everything here is steep. The cliffs, the staircases, the silence. You've come to the Tiger's Nest Monastery. It clings to the edge of a sheer cliff 3,000 feet above the valley floor as though pinned there by divine whim. The path up is narrow, steep, humbling, but the monastery is patient. It's been waiting. Legend says Guru, the second Buddha, flew here on the back of a tigress. He meditated in a cave for 3 years, 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 days, and 3 hours. Because spiritual precision is apparently important. That cave is now the heart of the monastery. And yes, people have heard things inside it. The monastery is whitewashed and gilded, beautiful in that way only places untouched by time can be. The air smells of juniper and incense, the kind that clings to your clothes like a whispered prayer. Monks drift quietly through the halls, never looking directly at you, as if they already know you're just passing through. But deeper in the structure, the rooms narrow, carvings grow more abstract, and the floor tilts ever so slightly like something beneath it is shifting. One chamber, sealed to the public, is said to house an eternal flame that burns without fuel. Only 3 monks are allowed to tend to it. They do not speak of it, ever. A rare and peculiar Bhutanese tells of a man who climbed to the monastery seeking wisdom but asked the wrong question at the wrong altar. When he returned to the village, his face had aged 50 years. His voice was gone. But his shadow, they say it still moved like a young man. Here's your fact. In 1998, the monastery nearly burned to the ground. A butter lamp was blamed. The fire destroyed much of the structure, but the cave, the Tiger's Nest itself, remained untouched, not even scorched. That part was quietly left out of official reports. The scholars offer polite theories, smart building techniques, luck, airflow, but none of them explain the photographs. In one taken during the blaze, a shadowy shape appears just above the cave entrance. Not a person, not smoke, something with wings. The new monastery was rebuilt in the exact shape of the old one. Down to the angles, the nails, the number of window slats. As if copying the form might appease the memory. You enter the prayer room and hear chanting. Low, repetitive, but no one's there. You keep walking. You descend now into cold wind and open land. Green rolls in every direction, the type of green you feel in your lungs. You're in Ireland, County Meath to be exact. And what lies ahead is not just a monument. It's a statement in stone louder than any cathedral. A massive passage tomb over 5,000 years old, older than Stonehenge or the pyramids, nestled into the Irish hills. From a distance, it looks like a gentle dome. But as you approach, you see the true strangeness. The entrance is framed with megaliths covered in spirals. Not symbols, spirals. As if meaning was too limiting. The entrance leads to a narrow tunnel, barely shoulder width. that stretches for 60 feet into the earth. At the end is the chamber, cruciform, stone-walled, and perfectly dry despite thousands of Irish winters. And above it all, the corbelled roof, balanced, eternal. Here's the eerie part. On the winter solstice, for just 17 minutes, sunlight enters a slit above the door and illuminates the inner chamber. Only then does the darkness briefly lift. A single golden beam crawling across stone that hasn't seen light since last year. Every year, thousands apply for a lottery to witness it in person. But here's the secret. Some years it doesn't happen, not because of clouds, but because the light simply doesn't reach. A local legend says that once every century, the solstice light misses the chamber entirely. And that's the year the ones below shift in their sleep. You brush your hand against the carved spirals. They feel smooth, but the cold lingers in your fingertips longer than it should. In 1699, a farmer tried to quarry stones to build a wall. He stopped after one night his livestock had all vanished by morning. No tracks, no blood, just an open gate. A cultural tidbit, Irish folklore warns against entering fairy mounds on solstice nights. Some say they're doorways, others that they're mouths. One tale describes a man who returned from after solstice light, except his wife swore he'd been buried a decade earlier. Now, scholars dismiss it, of course. They say is a tomb, a calendar, a communal ritual site. They say it is still dormant. You walk down the long tunnel alone, waiting for your eyes to adjust. You think you hear breathing, but it's probably just the wind, probably. Now, the stone is cool against your shoulder. Well, the light fades again. You keep walking. You find yourself surrounded by volcanic stone, now black, jagged, and far too warm for comfort. The ground radiates heat like an old grudge. You're on Easter Island, or as its people call it, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the Pacific, and they are watching. They're bigger than you expect, taller, more numerous, and unsettlingly quiet, lined up along the coast like sentinels waiting for something that no longer comes. Each one carved from volcanic tuff, with elongated heads, hollow eyes, and expressions that never quite settle between wise and tired. There are nearly 1,000 of them, no two identical. Some stand alone, some form silent parades. Others lie broken, half buried, half abandoned, as though whatever faith built them ran out mid-sentence. The face inward, not outward, toward the land, not the sea. Scholars say they represent ancestors watching over the people. Others say they were status symbols, markers of clan prestige. And then there's the old belief, whispered but not written, that the walked. The people insist their ancestors made them walk from quarry to coast. No wheels, no beasts of burden, just chanting, ropes, and rhythm. A few modern experiments have even managed to walk replicas short distances, swaying them like pendulums. But that doesn't explain everything. Some weigh over 80 tons, some moved miles. Some ended up facing cliffs with no explanation at all. You wander the quarry where unfinished still cling to the hills like thoughts that couldn't quite be spoken. Some lie halfway carved, as though their makers simply stopped and walked away mid-chisel. And here's your eerie detail. One set apart from the rest is buried up to its neck. Only the head is visible. Locals call it the Watcher. It's not listed on most maps. Guides avoid it. And one curious visitor who took a photo of it in 1978 described hearing a low humming that made his teeth ache. The film from his camera was blank, not damaged, blank. A cultural tidbit, In oral tradition, there's a god who sleeps beneath the island, a spirit of stone who lent their breath. Once every few centuries, if the balance of the island tips, he is said to stir. The tilt slightly, just slightly. No one ever measures them before and after. The scholars remain divided. Were the statues religious, political, decorative? Or was the act of carving itself the ritual, a kind of appeasement to time or memory or something more hungry? You walk among them now, their gazes fixed not on you but just past you, always just past. You resist the urge to look behind you. You keep walking. The air turns thin and dry, the kind of dry that cracks your lips and leaves a faint taste of copper on your tongue. You're in Peru now, standing at the edge of a desert that behaves more like a canvas than a landscape. Below you, and only visible from the sky, lie the lines. Hundreds of massive etched into the earth. Spiders, monkeys, hummingbirds, spirals, straight lines stretching miles, geometric shapes that seem impossibly perfect. Some are over 1,000 feet long. So big they can't be seen in full unless you're flying. And yet they were made over 1,500 years ago, without flight, without perspective, without allegedly needing to see the full picture. The designs were created by removing the top layer of iron-rich rock, revealing the lighter soil beneath. Simple in method, impossible in scale. Scholars still don't know exactly how or why. One popular theory, they were ritual paths, people walked them as processions. Another, they were astronomical calendars, or maps of underground water sources, or perhaps, as one researcher cautiously suggested, messages to someone above. The spider, for example, matches nearly perfectly with the rare Amazonian spider, a species that doesn't exist in the region. Or shouldn't. Here's your creepy detail. During aerial surveys in the 1960s, pilots reported brief electrical interference while flying over the spiral-shaped glyphs. Static, flickering gauges. One aircraft lost contact for 11 minutes, then reappeared on radar 20 kilometers off course. The pilot swore he hadn't moved. The lines never shift, never fade. The climate here is too dry, too stable. Some believe they're preserved by design, that the people built them not for themselves, but for time itself. And then there's the human element. At the center of several lines, bones have been found, not buried, just placed carefully, knees folded, eyes missing. A cultural tidbit, local legend tells of a bird who sees the lines not with eyes, but with memory. It flies only once every 100 years in silence, retracing the paths. If it sees you watching and remembers your face, you'll forget something important. Not all at once, just piece by piece. You climb the nearby viewing platform and stare down at the monkey. Its tail curls endlessly. You feel like you've seen it before, maybe in a dream, maybe in something older than dreams. Well, the wind rises, but there's no sound. You keep walking. The wind has quieted, but the silence feels staged, like the world is holding its breath too perfectly. You're in Turkey again, this time standing before something that shouldn't exist. Not here, not this old, not this deliberate. All you're at is it looks like the shattered remains of a forgotten thought, massive T-shaped stone pillars arranged in rings, each etched with animals, symbols, and patterns no one has translated. The stones are 12,000 years old, older than writing, older than metal, older than cities. It rewrote history when it was discovered. Before, we thought civilization began with farming. But this place suggests the opposite, that spiritual gathering, worship, or something eerier came first. The pillars came before the plow. You step between them cautiously. The carvings are crisp despite the years: snakes, vultures, scorpions, headless figures. Some stones show arms along the sides like anthropomorphic giants standing still for. Others are blank, waiting. One archaeologist described the site as a cathedral without a roof, built by people with no homes. Here's your uncanny fact. The entire site was deliberately buried around 8000 BCE, covered over, hidden, as if the builders wanted it forgotten, or protected, or both. No one knows why. There are newer layers too, stacked atop the old, as if generations returned to this place again and again but never improved it, just added dust. Repetition instead of renovation, almost like ritual. A local tale seldom told speaks of a stone dreamer, a figure who walks the rings at night when the moon is gone. No eyes, no mouth, just hands brushing the carvings, listening for names. A cultural tidbit: in nearby Kurdish folklore, there's a belief that certain stones can trap time. Not moments, not people, time itself. Stand too long beside such a stone and you begin to feel yourself slow, not age, just slow. The scholars debate whether it was a temple, a burial ground, or a cosmic calendar. Some suggest it had astronomical significance, that the pillars align with star patterns. Others propose the carvings depict not animals but constellations, myths set in stone. You run your fingers along one pillar. The texture feels familiar, like the underside of bark. But when you glance back, the carving you touched is no longer the one you remember. You take a step back. The ground underfoot feels softer, like dust that never quite settles. You keep walking. You return to Europe now, but not the one you know. This version is wild, forested, and quiet in that old way, the hush of things that used to matter. You're in Bohemia, present-day Czech Republic, in a dark patch of forest where trees curve just a little too sharply. Here stands the Church of George Inn. But no one prays here anymore. The roof is mostly intact. The pews are dusty but upright. The altar, though crumbling, still holds space. It's not the architecture that unnerves you. It's the ghosts. Not real ones, probably. They're sculptures, plaster forms of hooded figures seated in silence. Cloaked, faceless, frozen in prayer, some kneel, others sit. One stands at the back, hands clasped or maybe folded. No face, no features, just intention, dozens of them unmoving. They were installed by an artist in 2012 as a way to remember the souls of the village. But locals claim the figures shift, not visibly, but subtly. One old man swears a figure used to sit in his wife's favorite pew. Now it kneels in the aisle. Here, the odd fact: the church itself was abandoned after a series of incidents. The roof collapsed during a funeral in 1968. No one was hurt, but the villagers took it as a sign. They never returned. The statues came decades later, but the feeling, that was always here. Visitors have reported hearing whispers in the church, a low murmuring like distant chanting. Some say it only happens when no one speaks. One journalist left a recorder overnight. It captured 7 hours of silence and 1 minute of soft breathing. A local tells of a white watcher, a spirit who guards forgotten places of worship. She appears only when no one is looking, and those who catch a glimpse report intense feelings of homesickness for places they've never been. The scholars dismiss it all as psychological projection, the mind responding to empty space and ambiguous form. But even they admit, no one has ever documented all the figures. Some appear in photos taken before they were installed. You walk the aisle slowly, every step echoes. You pass one statue whose head is tilted slightly as if it's listening. Another has its hands outstretched. The dust on the palms has been disturbed recently. A wind stirs through the broken window, though the air outside was still. You keep walking. The forest dissolves into flatness, now wind whipping low across the stones. You're in Northumberland, England, just shy of Scotland, where the land is moody and suspicious of strangers. Before you lies Hadrian's Wall. It doesn't tower, it slithers. Once stretching nearly 80 Roman miles across Britain, this wall was the northernmost frontier of the Roman Empire. A line drawn not to keep invaders out, but to keep ideas in. It divided what Rome could manage from what it could not understand. Built in AD 122 under Emperor Hadrian, the wall was manned by soldiers from across the empire, Syrians, Gauls, North Africans, many of whom had never seen snow before they were stationed here. Some lasted years. Others disappeared entirely. You walk beside the stones, some are sharp-edged, others worn to the nub. A few bare carved names, builders, commanders, units, most just fade into moss. Here's the strange bit. Certain segments of the wall seem to bleed during the rainy season. Not visibly, not dramatically, but mineral-rich red streaks appear on the stones, seeping from within as if the wall remembers things it would rather not. Archaeologists say it's just iron oxide. Locals say it's the tears of the centuries who froze to death facing a world they weren't meant to conquer. And then there's 39, one of the best preserved outposts. In the 1800s, a group of workers clearing stones reported finding bones beneath the floor, child-sized, with a Roman pendant tucked beside the ribs. No records of children being stationed at the wall exist, but there it was. The lesser-known legend tells of the Black Standard, a Roman unit cursed for desertion, doomed to patrol the wall in shadow forever. Farmers claim to see figures walking along the ruined path in moonlight, not ghosts exactly, just shapes that don't notice fences or time. Here's your cultural tidbit. Among ancient Britons, there was a belief that borders were alive, that walls, when long enough, could hear, speak, even mourn. The scholars debate the wall's true purpose. Defensive line, psychological barrier, imperial statement. One theory suggests it was a ritual gesture, the empire physically imprinting its will onto the land. You press your palm against one of the colder stones. A carved symbol, too worn to make out, seems to pulse beneath your touch, just once. The wind picks up, whispering in Latin, or maybe it's just the wind. You keep walking. The wall fades behind you and you descend now into heat again, not the open kind, but the suffocating, hissing warmth of ancient underground fire. You're in Naples, Italy, but not the Naples of espresso and scooters. You're below it. Deep beneath the cobbled streets lies the Naples underground. A city beneath the city. The Greeks started it. The Romans expanded it. Tunnels, aqueducts, cisterns, some of which date back over 2,000 years. And then World War II came and the tunnels sheltered thousands during bombing raids. Entire families lived down here between the bones of forgotten empires. Some never left. You walk through narrow corridors lit by weak bulbs and half-remembered prayers. The walls sweat. Occasionally you hear dripping, but there's no water. One chamber contains Roman-era graffiti, a crude drawing of a woman with wings labeled, a goddess of the underworld or perhaps a wish for freedom, or both. Scholars can't agree. Naturally. And here's your unsettling fact. In the 1980s, a previously unknown section was opened by accident. A maintenance worker broke through a soft wall. Behind it, they found a fully intact room. Furniture, a cot, a candle stub, and a journal. As the last entry read, "It's not the dark that's the problem, it's what listens when I breathe." The handwriting stopped midway through a word. The room has since been resealed, publicly for safety, privately because no one wants to explain why motion sensors inside still activate every few months. Here's your strange tidbit. Neapolitan superstition holds that below every city lies its shadow twin, a version where things left unresolved continue. Lost time, lost people, lost thoughts. If you fall asleep underground, they say you might wake in the wrong version. During your walk, you spot a red mark on the stone. Not paint, not chalk, a smear, just one fresh. Well, you don't touch it. The hallway curves sharply to the left. You take it. Not because you want to, but because the air behind you cools just a little too suddenly. You keep walking. You emerge not into daylight, but into something stranger, a half-light filtered through ancient glass. You're in Prague now, in the heart of the old town, where time coils than the alleyways. You've come to the old Jewish cemetery. It's small, crowded, and wrong in a quiet, aching way. The cemetery dates back to the early 15th century, though some graves are far older. Around 12,000 visible tombstones stand here, crooked, lining stacked like thoughts whispered in panic. But beneath them lie layers upon layers of graves. Estimates suggest over 100,000 are buried here, one atop another, a dozen deep in places. The Jewish law forbade the disturbance of remains. So when space ran out, they didn't move the bones, they added soil and buried again and again. It is a graveyard built like a book, a vertical scroll of grief. The stones jut out at angles, some bear names, others only symbols, hands, trees, animals, cracked candles. One stone is carved with a sleeping lion. Beneath it lies a poet whose name has been forgotten, but whose dreams, they say, still hover around the site like smoke. And here's your dark little fact. In 1917, during restoration efforts, workers discovered a sealed box beneath one of the stones. Inside were dozens of tiny figurines carved from bone and wood, no eyes, all smiling. No one claimed responsibility. The box was quietly reburied. No one has gone looking for it since. A cultural tidbit: in Czech folklore, stones mark not just memory but weight. A stone placed on a grave keeps the soul from wandering, but if too many are removed, the soul grows curious. And once it leaves, it doesn't always return alone. There's a myth tied to the cemetery, older than records, that a man buried here was once the scribe of shadows, a scholar who wrote down forbidden prayers in invisible ink. They say on moonless nights you can hear pages turning near his grave, but there's no wind, no paper. The scholars dismiss these stories. Folkloric noise, they call it, post-war inventions. Yet no one stays here after dusk, not even the caretakers. You walk the narrow paths, your shoulders brushing the stones on either side. You try not to look too long at the oldest ones. The names seem to shift when you blink. A crow calls from somewhere you can't see. You keep walking. The shadows sharpen again, not deeper, just more intentional. You've crossed into Ethiopia now, into the highlands of where a complex of churches waits, sunken into the earth like memories pressed between pages. You're standing before the Church of St. George, carved entirely from a single piece of rock. Not built, excavated. The roof of the church is level with the ground around it. You descend into it, following a trench-like passage, as if returning to something not entirely yours. Built in the 12th century by King, allegedly under divine instruction, the 11 rock-hewn churches were meant to recreate Jerusalem in miniature. A holy city carved downward, not upward. The interiors are narrow, low, the ceilings curve like ribs. Crosses are etched into the walls over and over like talismans or apologies. And here's your quiet horror. When archaeologists used radar to scan the earth beneath the churches in the early 2000s, they discovered additional voids. Chambers, tunnels, passageways leading nowhere. They weren't on any map. They haven't been explored. Well, yet, the priests don't acknowledge them. One was asked directly and said simply, "Some places are not for questions." Of a cultural detail, local belief holds that angels helped dig the churches, not metaphorically, literally. There's even a tradition that says you can still hear their footsteps echoing in the trenches if you walk alone just before dawn. A Canadian tourist once recorded audio while walking one of those paths. The file reportedly contained 12 minutes of silence, followed by a single whisper in an unrecognizable language. Her travel blog ended abruptly that same week. You pass into one of the darker chambers. No windows, just candlelight and stone. The temperature doesn't change, but the feeling does. You reach a doorway carved in the shape of a keyhole. Inside, the shadows do not behave. They gather in the corners like breath held too long. The scholars argue whether the churches were built as pilgrimage destinations, secret monasteries, or sacred reenactments. One theory suggests they were never meant to be visited at all. That was attempting to seal something in. You pause beneath a cross-shaped skylight. Light drips down onto the altar. It feels slow, too slow. Behind you, a priest hums a wordless song. You keep walking. You emerge from the trench temples into high sun and thin air, but the light does little to soothe. Your feet carry you north again, this time into Armenia, a land of stone and sky where churches grow out of the rock like confessions. And here, on a quiet cliffside, sits the monastery of. Built partly inside the mountain, monastery is a fusion of silence and stone. The name means spear, a reference to the lance that pierced Christ's side, which was once stored here. Or so they say. You enter through the arched gate and into the cool gloom of the inner chambers. The oldest chapel was carved entirely into the cliffside in the 4th century. No mortar, no bricks, just faith and chisels. As you step deeper, the light dims and the acoustics shift. Sounds seem to bend and return differently, slower, stranger. The singing of pilgrims echoes like it's being translated by something older. And here's the strange thing, the architecture has no clear source. No plans, no inscriptions, only mathematical precision and spiritual silence. One researcher called it an equation written in basalt. Carvings of doves, lions, and geometric symbols wind along the walls. But one relief, nearly eroded, shows a hand reaching downward from a jagged cloud. Below it, a face turned upward, missing its eyes. That one isn't in the tour brochures. A cultural tidbit: in Armenian folklore, caves are the mouths of sleeping gods. You may enter, but you must not speak the god's name aloud. If it hears its name, it wakes confused, and confusion turns to hunger. In 1951, an engineer measuring water flow beneath the monastery found an unmapped tunnel. He descended with a rope and flashlight. According to his notes, he found a room with walls that breathed. He climbed back up, refused to speak of it again. 2 weeks later, he left Armenia and never returned. The scholars claim these legends are embellishments, that the church was built for monastic life, not for mystery. But the stone tells another story. There's no ornamentation in the deepest chapel, no cross, no inscription, just 4 pillars, and silence so deep it rings. You place your hand on the inner wall. The stone feels damp, but only for you. A drop of water lands on your wrist. The ceiling is dry. You keep walking. The trail leads you farther east now, past mountains, past deserts, until you stand in a city both eternal and eroding. You're in Varanasi, India, one of the oldest continually inhabited cities on Earth. But you're not here for the ghats or the temples. You're here for Ghat, the burning ghats. The air is thick, sweet, acrid, holy. Smoke winds upward from open-air pyres, dancing in spirals toward a sun that seems strangely indifferent. You are among cremation fires that have never truly gone out. They burn day and night, always. This is where bodies are brought for moksha, release from the cycle of rebirth. To die in Varanasi is to skip the line, to be freed. The fires here are old, older than history, passed down not by documents but by ash. You step carefully between the mourners, the priests, the dams, the caste whose duty is to tend the flame. They speak little. They do not flinch. Here, the unsettling fact: beneath the ghat, the ash piles grow, not just from burning, but from time. It's said the ground here is deeper than it should be. Compressed bone, dust, memory. Occasionally, strange things rise from it. A bracelet, a tooth, a statue that no one remembers burying. One such item, a small brass box found in 1993, contained a folded scrap of paper with a single Sanskrit phrase: "He still waits." It was returned to the fire. A cultural tidbit: in some Hindu traditions, the soul's release must be accompanied by sound, a bell, a whisper, a name. If that sound is missed, the soul lingers until it is called again. A man beside you chants quietly. He is not mourning, he is guiding. It is not grief, it is duty. The scholars have written volumes on the ghat, but even they concede something strange. The fires here never spread. Despite open flames, wind, and chaos, the fire never touches what it should not. It burns exactly what it's supposed to, nothing more, nothing less. You feel the heat on your cheeks, not pain, just presence. The smoke doesn't sting your eyes, it welcomes you like an old friend remembering your name. One pyre burns lower now. The flames flicker blue for a moment, just a moment. You step back, bow your head. You keep walking. You move west now into cooler air and stone streets. The world feels grayer, more orderly. You're in Lisbon, Portugal, walking along the Tagus River, where explorers once set out to map the unknown. But tonight, you're not looking outward, you're looking down. Beneath the city lies the Cloaca Maxima of Lisbon, a Roman sewer system older than the language most people speak here. Normally sealed, normally dry, but after heavy rain, parts of it reveal themselves. You've arrived during one of those moments, a metal grate loose by water and time. The locals call it Romanas, tours are rare, access is inconsistent. Some say the tunnels change, that the layout never quite matches the maps. You descend anyway, curiosity makes strange choices. The walls are smooth, worn by centuries of runoff, but patches of mosaic remain, flashes of color in a world that no longer wants to be seen. Faded images of fish, coins, and in one panel, a man with no eyes pouring water into a cup that never fills. It's quiet except for your footsteps and the soft drip of memory. And somewhere deeper, the sound of running water, though you passed no stream. Here's your strange fact. Archaeologists found a locked iron door in one branch of the tunnels in 1999. Sealed, welded, no historical record of it. The door was removed. Behind it, a chamber with dozens of tiny clay vessels, all filled with sand. No two had the same weight. No two made the same sound when shaken. The vessels were resealed. The chamber closed again. And here's your cultural tidbit. In Iberian folklore, water beneath the earth belongs to the enchanted beings, often female, who guard secrets. If you disturb their domain without permission, they follow you home. Not maliciously, just persistently. One urban legend tells of a worker who spent too long in the galleries. He came out disoriented, couldn't stop hearing whispers. He built a well in his kitchen. No one saw him again. The scholars chalk it up to gas leaks, or loneliness, or metaphor, but the tunnel air smells clean, almost too clean, like it's been recently replaced. You press forward, one light flickers behind you. When you glance back, the way you came is darker than it should be. Well, you don't retrace your steps. You keep walking. Your steps echo now, not against stone, but through sand. The temperature rises, dry and radiant, as you step into Saqqara, Egypt, a necropolis older than most remembered gods. Before the pyramids of Giza, there was the step pyramid of. It doesn't sparkle like the Great Pyramid. It looms, an ancient stairway frozen mid-climb, its edges sharp, its intentions unreadable. Built in the 27th century BCE by the polymath architect Imhotep, it was the first large-scale stone construction in human history. You walk the long corridor into the burial complex. The limestone walls glint like they remember sunlight better than the surface above. Beneath the pyramid, a labyrinth of tunnels sprawls outward over 3 miles in total. Some lead nowhere, some loop back, and some are no longer on any map. In 2007, a sealed chamber was opened for the first time in. Inside, a sarcophagus. Empty, no markings, no dust, just one perfect black beetle carved into the lid. It was photographed and then misplaced. No one remembers moving it, no one can find the records. Your cultural detail. In ancient Egyptian belief, the heart was not the seat of emotion, the Ka, the life force, was. The dead were buried with amulets and spells to guide the Ka safely to the afterlife. But in some burials, like those found beneath Saqqara, no such protections were used. As if they didn't want the Ka to leave. As if they needed it to stay. The scholars argue over whether the step pyramid was simply a tomb or a symbolic ladder for the soul. One fringe theory proposes it was a containment device, not for the dead, but for something they buried alive. You descend one of the lesser tunnels. It narrows quickly until you must crouch, then crawl, then stop entirely. The head carved in the wall, a handprint, human-sized, pressed deep, too deep. The stone bulges outward, not inward. You crawl back slowly. The tunnel breathes around you, the sand shifts under your palms. You rise and find your footing again. You keep walking. The desert fades behind you like the last exhale of a long-held breath. You're in Japan now, Kyoto. The city whispers tradition, yes, temples, geishas, wooden homes, but you're not here for the polished history. You're here for the soft rot beneath it. Nestled behind a quiet shrine lies a lesser-known sight, a temple most tourists overlook, or perhaps the temple overlooks them. Over 1,200 stone statues line the mossy hillside here, each one different. Some grinning, some solemn, some grimacing in a way that feels too recent. They're depictions of Buddha's disciples, carved by ordinary people in the 1980s, encouraged to sculpt in their own style. Which is why one statue wears glasses, another a baseball cap. One appears to be mid-laugh, teeth bared, eyes wide, the kind of laughter that ends in a long silence. But here's your peculiar fact. In 2003, a temple groundskeeper reported that 3 statues changed positions overnight. Not shattered, not moved by prank, rotated, slightly. All facing the same direction toward a 4th statue that had cracked during a storm. The crack sealed itself within a week. The others rotated back. A cultural tidbit. In certain Buddhist sects, it is said that statues absorb pieces of the prayers whispered to them. Over time, those filled with unbalanced emotions, fear, rage, grief, begin to lean. No one can explain how, but they lean, always slightly forward. One monk, long since retired, claimed that some only pretend to be stone. That they're part of a cycle, the disciple reincarnated into stone for 100 years to listen, then released. You walk slowly among them. A moss-covered face smiles up at you. You swear it wasn't facing your direction before. Another has water pooling in its open palms, but the rain stopped hours ago. The bell at the main hall rings, though no one is nearby. Birds stop singing for exactly 3 seconds. You bow instinctively, not to a specific statue, just in case. You keep walking. The temple gives way to coastline now. Cold wind returns. You're in Scotland, to be precise. A scattered archipelago where time washes ashore like driftwood. And here, buried under peat and sea spray, is a Neolithic chambered cairn over 5,000 years old was designed with unsettling accuracy. Its entrance passage, low and narrow, aligns precisely with the setting sun on the winter solstice. For a few minutes each year, golden light floods the dark interior. The rest of the year, it is shadow. You duck inside. The air is damp, the kind that carries the memory of every breath ever taken inside. The chamber walls are thick, built to last, but what waits within isn't just stone. In the 12th century, Viking raiders broke into. They carved runes into the walls, some mundane, some obscene, some different. One says is to be watched in the darkness. Do not sit with your back to the wall. Of another, I saw a great beast. It moved without sound. I dared not follow. And then there's the carving no one speaks of. It's not Norse. It's not Neolithic. It's a symbol, a circle intersected by 4 lines like a compass that's forgotten how to point. Scholars say it's graffiti. Others say it predates both the Vikings and the tomb itself. Local folklore refers to as the whale's belly, not metaphorically. The idea being that the dead were swallowed by the land, digested, and reborn. But there's one version of the tale in which something else was inside the whale. And the tomb was built not for the dead, but to feed it. Here's your odd detail. During a winter solstice in 1999, a camera crew filming inside the tomb recorded what they believed was heat distortion on the tape. A wavering blur across the stone wall. But the chamber was 3C. No heat source, no malfunction. The footage disappeared. A cultural tidbit. Folk once believed in Troyes, subterranean creatures that lived in mounds and hated being seen. If you built your home over one of their hills, your livestock sickened, and you dreamed of cold fingers brushing your spine. You place your hand on the carved stone. It's colder than ice. You hear something shift in the passage behind you, not a footstep, just the air remembering one. You crawl back into the wind. You keep walking. You feel lighter now, not safe exactly, but detached. As though something has gently unhooked your sense of time. The path beneath you fades to dust, then stone, then polished tile. You've arrived at your final monument. You're standing inside the Pantheon of Rome. Yes, that Rome, ancient, eternal, and always watching. The Pantheon is a structure that should not still be standing. But it is, impossibly intact, built nearly 2,000 years ago, its dome still uncracked, its oculus still open, its purpose still mysterious. Outside, the traffic hums, modern Rome bustles. Inside, everything hushes. The walls absorb sound like a sponge soaked in centuries. You step in and feel it, that gentle pressure on the chest, like being stared at from the inside. The oculus, the great eye in the dome's center, is open to the sky. Rain falls straight through it. Light pours directly in. And yet nothing here feels exposed. The building was originally constructed by, then rebuilt by Hadrian. But Hadrian left the old inscription, Magrippalf Costi son of made this. A lie carved in permanence, or a tribute, or both. The scholars argue endlessly. Was it a temple to all gods, a celestial calendar, an imperial power move? One theory suggests the oculus was not just symbolic, it was meant to release something, or receive it. During renovations in the 15th century, workers found a sealed chamber behind one of the inner walls. No door, no passage, just space. Inside was a single marble basin filled with fine dust, and at the center a tiny obsidian sphere, unmarked, cold. It was removed, then misplaced, of course. A cultural tidbit, in Roman superstition, round temples were meant to confuse spirits. Linear lines offered paths, circles offered traps. The Pantheon, by that logic, is not a place of worship. It's a snare. And then there's the echo. Clap your hands beneath the dome and the sound returns a half second before you finish clapping. Scientists blame acoustics, architects nod solemnly. The janitor near the front entrance just shrugs and says, "She's always been this way." You sit on the marble bench under the oculus. A single beam of sunlight lands at your feet. Dust swirls in it like slow lightning. Some say if you sit here long enough, completely still, the gods you don't believe in will come sit beside you. Not to speak, just to wait. While you stand, but for the last time tonight, you keep walking. And now the monuments fall away behind you like a mist retreating from memory. The earth is soft again beneath your feet. The stars are old, familiar. A sky without oculus, no dome, no fire, just a gentle ceiling of forgetfulness. You've wandered through ancient fears, stood in the breath of buried secrets, watched stone remember names long since unspoken. You've walked the paths carved by kings who thought themselves gods and gods carved by hands that trembled. But here, now, there are no more echoes, only the quiet rhythm of your own breath, only the weight of what you've learned brushing gently against sleep. Let the return to their stare, let the cairns hum under moss, let the pantheon's eye blink slowly shut. You're no longer being followed, you're being let go. Whatever stirred beneath the soil has returned to dreaming. Whatever watched from statues, tunnels, and shadows has turned away, not with indifference, but with understanding. You came to see, you did. And now the stones go still. Soften your breath, unclench the questions. Let your body remember what it means to rest. History doesn't end, it curls beside you, it hushes. Asleep now, you've made it through the night. And the monuments, they were never meant to stand forever. But somehow they wait anyway.